Hi, welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert Rand, your host for the day. Today I'm going to be joined by a couple of friends in the industry that have a really interesting background when it comes to outbound e-commerce marketing, specific to email marketing, among other channels that they work with, and thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about how to best optimize your outbound email marketing in the e-commerce industry. And so let me start off by introducing Joe from Emarsys and Steve from Webbula. Joe, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So Joe Devine, I manage strategic partnerships and alliances for Emarsys. I've been in this space, boy, I don't want to date myself, but it goes back a couple of decades. E-com specifically has really been a focus of mine, maybe 15 years. And at Emarsys, our platform focuses primarily on that vertical, and email is certainly at the heart of our direct digital addressable marketing strategies.
Cool. And Steve?
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Steve Wagner. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at Webbula. I've been in the marketing game for about 15 years or so, and specifically leading the strategic direction of marketing at Webbula since the beginning of the year. So happy to jump on board and talk about this very important subject that I've lived a long time in.
Awesome. So, this takes me back to my digital agency days, of course. And whenever we talk about email marketing, it all starts with the list. It all starts with the contacts that you're going to be reaching out to. Why don't we start off talking a little bit about building a healthy list and what that looks like, what the process looks like from the start, and keeping momentum of that so that things don't get too stale.
Yeah, I think any great marketing campaign can really start and end with the acquisition or the lack of a solid and accurate list. So at Webbula, we help organizations every day validate and verify that the targets that they're going after are accurate, and also make sure that they're threat-free, so that the deliverability and sender reputation in any campaign is as solid as possible. So we help organizations identify those threats within their list, but then also make sure that we are helping them with any typos, any bad information within their database, and help identify that before they kick things off.
So a merchant might start off with a list from, let's say, from their e-com platform, from their point of sale, from their ERP, their CRM. They could have data squirreled away in just about any disparate system across their organization. And in some cases, that can get a little older, or some data entry, the human element can be an issue. So basically, your team will ping some of that data, clean it up, so that it's a better list to start from.
Yeah, a typical engagement for us, Robert, is an organization comes to us and says exactly that. We've acquired information from various sources over various years, and gosh, we can't remember the last time that we've actually updated this thing or actually had it cleaned, right? So we will help level set in many respects, where they sit with their current information. Then the conversation can generally turn to, well, let's make sure that information stays fresh, moving forward. So we're not revisiting this, situation 2 years from now, right? So Webbula also has the ability through a real-time API called our lead hygiene product, where we're able to validate information as it's input into the system as well. So we help level set, kind of get you in a position where your list is fresh, but then keep that freshness going as they acquire more information in the future.
Yeah. And now, aside from just typos or maybe email addresses that are no longer active, from my history, for better or worse, I've also run into email addresses that are known to spam lists that are, I suppose, honeypots, or
right.
I don't know what we're calling them these days. But does your team play a role in helping to keep an eye for anything bad that may have been seeded into a list? Maybe so somebody doesn't like a company, throws a bad email address into a sign-up form, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a real differentiation for us. And many organizations come to us and say, yeah, I've worked with other providers in the past, and they've just been able to tell me that an email is valid or not. And that has value. But at the end of the day, that a malicious mole, a honeypot, a spam trap is also a deliverable email address, right? So it's a real eye opener to organizations when we first give them that first report of where everything kind of sits in the threat detection side of things. So yeah, you're exactly right, Robert. We're able to identify, organizations that, email addresses that we know are bots or phishing attacks or honeypots, so that they can be more targeted and more personalized in their messaging and really, keep those messages away from those pieces of their data.
Yeah, and so Joe, Webbula comes in, helps clean up existing lists and helps maybe to append some data to existing lists to enrich the data. Tell me a little bit about ongoing collection. Where do you see merchants do really well? Is it collecting addresses as people are checking out? Is it, other campaigns that help to drive, the new subscriber acquisition?
Absolutely, Robert. All of the above. I know we're going to talk about deliverability in a bit, but the ability to obviously end up in someone's inbox does start with identification. And when someone's engaging your brand, anonymous traffic coming to your site for the first time, you need to have the strategies and tactics in place to identify that traffic. One of the best ways to do so in the digital world is their email address. So the initial lightbox on entry, very common. We've seen it all over the place, and for good reason, because it works. Identifying those sessions at the email address level is certainly a list growth strategy and tactic, and it works very well. But you need to think about how you're engaging those sessions, those individual contacts during that first hour, 3 hours, day via the email channel automatically. It's that identification that is so important, that acquisition initially when someone engages your brand that can increase conversion rates tenfold. So making sure that all of those prospects or leads who have not converted are identified at the highest rate possible using tactics like a lightbox, very important. To your point though, engaging a customer immediately after the sale, not just from a transactional perspective, but from an engagement perspective, from a marketing perspective, telling a story about your brand. Why would they want to buy again? Helping them understand what they're going to expect during the order process. That's hugely important too. So during the the checkout funnel, absolutely ask. In some cases, and it's legal, why not add everybody as a new customer coming through the funnel to your marketing list and give them the opportunity to opt out, but prove to them there's a good reason that they're on your list in the first place by providing valuable, personalized, relevant, targeted content during that first, say, week after they buy from you for the first time.
So, that brings a few more questions from my side. I know that a few years ago, Google got more serious about, pop-ups and modals and light boxes and such that were interfering with the user experience. So, my understanding has always been, though, that as long as it's user-friendly, it's easy to click out of on mobile, and perhaps in some cases, maybe even you use cookies or such so that you don't keep serving up the same screen over and over again to someone already interacted with it. Would your experience be similar, that as long as it's user-friendly and that it's a well-constructed system, that it makes sense?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I think Google in their terms of service uses the word modal and interstitial, and the definition of those words are like, you can't obstruct a visitor's ability to interact with your site. You can't create, to your point, a landing page experience that is outside the intended. I don't know what the legalese is to verbatim in the Google terms of service, but yes, I mean, your whole goal is to warm and nurture and create a positive experience of these website visitors. So you need to have command and control and business logic and the technology to back it up. So you are presenting a user experience that's welcomed and desirable. I mean, without that, acquisition is probably going to not just suffer, but can even be problematic. The worst email you send is to those who don't want email, right? And that'll come up, I'm sure, in the later part of this discussion around deliverability and reputation.
Do you find that during that sign-up process, that giving users a chance to choose maybe which topics they'd like to receive emails on? I know we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about segmentation and such based upon shopping habits and things like that. But if someone is going out of their way to register for email, is that something that's sometimes helpful, giving them some choice?
Absolutely. I think someone recently coined the term zero-party data, data that our customers are giving to us. Great. But you don't want an overly burdensome acquisition funnel either. So you need to think about the most compelling and valuable data points that are going to help you more effectively engage that audience member. You don't need presence of pets and household income if your content is simply bifurcated male and female. You need to know gender, and that's it. If your product mix is based on outdoor activity, and that really differentiates, the content you'd provide, maybe that's the only question you asked. So absolutely, that data is important, and that does, to your point, play into segmentation strategy, which ultimately plays into the context of relevancy and targeting.
And my last question on acquisition for the moment, I reserve the right to come up with more, right? When it comes to some kind of an offer, like getting a coupon for registering for an email list, or reward points, for if you've got a loyalty program, or some other kind of benefit, do you find that really moves the needle a lot, that people need that push? Do you find that they just unsubscribe in a week anyway? Any major thoughts on that process?
Thoughts for days, Robert. How much time do we have here? So, incentives are they're incentives. They incentivize folks, right? I mean, people like a free lunch. So couponing is typically highly effective. And sure, you get your bargain basement shoppers who will elicit behaviors that you don't want. But you can understand that in the data. You can go back, you can look at your acquisition funnel, you can understand who's coming through, who's buying one time with a coupon and never buying again and unsubscribing a week later. That behavior is clear to see. But you can also see folks who are coming in, maybe you've identified them, and you can overlay a propensity or a predicted lifetime value, for instance, of a high dollar amount based on some data that you have. That might be the perfect opportunity to give them a really powerful incentive to buy for the first time, knowing that you might keep them as a customer. Folks that have map constraints, maybe some kind of price integrity constraints, maybe profitability constraints, you can do incentivization beyond dollars. A good example, I worked with a client. They were selling a product in the outdoor space with an AOV of like $600. They had a free gift with purchase, which was a can koozie. It was like 30 cents.
Yeah.
Pick, pack, and ship with every order, 30 cents all in on a $600 AOV, and they increased their conversion rate in that new acquisition funnel with that offer by marked percentage.
And what I love about things like that is that, I've had clients over time that have had to follow map pricing, and the manufacturer sets the lowest price that you can sell at. But typically offering them a free gift with their order doesn't violate any of that. So there's a lot of things that you can do to differentiate so that, everyone else is offering the exact same thing at the exact same price. But if they get it from you, they get a koozie. A lot of fun stuff like that. And, while we're wrapping up on the list acquisition side of things, I imagine that a lot of the times, you mentioned that we don't want to get in the way of the shopper or the visitor from signing up for the list. That the most common form that I run into is just asking for an email address. And Steve, I know that your team has some ability to append data. And maybe this will focus it toward both of you, but I would imagine that being able to send more personalized messages where it's, instead of just saying, hi list subscriber, you're actually saying, hi Steve, hi
Right.
Joe, where you've got a little bit more going on there. Do you see that as a value prop to get the list quickly, but be able to append to it as well from other known data that's in the universe?
I can take it. I mean, data is powerful. Data-driven decisions, especially when you're automating them, are powerful. So if you use, let's say, a real-time API to ping someone like Webbula to overlay that data, absolutely that can help you craft better quality messaging. You do run that risk of the creepiness factor, right? You do need to consider,
Right.
if they didn't tell us, that your first name's Joe, do you want to call him Joe? Out in the real world, if you walk into a retail shop and you meet someone behind the counter who's never met you before and they say, "Hi, Joe, welcome," that's creepy. So you can balance that. When you think of acquisition and data points, let's say outside the email channel, mobile number, Facebook account, web session ID, cookie, all of these other unique identifiers that can help you align a more targeted engagement strategy will add value. And you don't need to think about acquisition and list growth simply by counting the number of email addresses you have on file. Understanding the percentage of that audience where you also have a mobile number, or how about folks where you only have a mobile number and no email address, or how about folks where you've identified them on Facebook, but you have not a mobile number or an email. What can we do then? And the same type of warming and nurturing for that first week of their engagement with your brand could happen via social, and you can automate that.
Yeah, I'll add that we typically get the request to add in other parts of PII. Initially I have phone number, but I need email, or I need email and I need phone number and name, to kind of validate who they are. We're able to also layer in over 110 different kind of like personal interest sources as well. So we can help take that educated guess factor, kind of way up and say that, based on the information that they've provided in the past, we know that they're more likely to respond to, this type of messaging, personalization, X, Y, and Z. I think it's important to note that when you do that, just make sure you're careful where that data is coming from. I know modeled data and AI is kind of all the rage right now and things of that nature, but you can certainly set yourself up for failure if you're not validating where that modeling is coming from. The good news with Webbula is that all of our data is completely self-reported, deterministic, individually linked. We never use modeled data to artificially inflate a database or artificially inflate maybe an interest that person doesn't necessarily have. So that's always something we caution. We don't say it's not a bad thing to do. It's just that it's not as good as being individually linked and being directly linked to that person that you're marketing to.
And let's shift over a little bit more so we've got our list, right? We've cleaned it up. We've nurtured it, and we're continuing to do so to continue keeping that healthy list growing, and it's its own beast. Now it comes time to actually get some ROI out of that list that we've got. So sending times, I've found different industries, different types of products, whether it's consumer products, and even depending on what type of consumer it's targeting demographically or otherwise, versus B2B, when an email send works. Luckily, I don't send out too many e-blasts these days, but, I don't usually like to send something that's going to be in people's inboxes at the beginning of the day when they're cleaning out their junk. I personally, and, I don't know how the metrics have shifted, but, I've always liked to send something a little bit more toward midday if I'm targeting B2B. On consumer, though, I've seen it work both ways depending on, what people's interactions are going to be like. Joe, what have you seen? And you probably see a lot of this data.
Absolutely. And the way that you just positioned that makes me smile. I actually wrote an article moons ago in, I think it was Multi-Channel Merchant, and it was all about the best time to send email, because it is such a hot topic, and still is, which sometimes boggles my mind. And I think, to your earlier points, that's fair and all, thinking about user behavior and when someone might be in their inbox or when they're, ultimately checking email. But no one recipient is created the same. Now, back then, what I was writing about was the concept of, send time optimization, or, intelligence and data-driven decisions about when to get an email in front of someone. And I basically said, it doesn't matter when you send email, and no little gizmo or feature is going to help you kind of get in the inbox at the right time. What you really need is for the recipient to acknowledge the brand, and they know who you are because you've been sending them quality content. You've been engaging them since day one. And that truly, when you think about the numbers and the metrics, and you think about engagement metrics, opens, reads, clicks, how people are responding and reacting to email, those are impacted most successfully when you get the timing or the frequency rather right. And frequency is almost always driven by relevancy. So that has to be taken into account. Now, fast forward 5 years, I think, we've gotten really good as an industry in using data to understand delivery times. And so with a more sophisticated piece of tech, I think at a personal level, and the numbers prove this, you can understand habits better individually. So no longer do you have to say Tuesday at 10 a.m. is the best time to send an email, or Thursday at 2 p.m. is the best time to send an email, but rather you can use historical data for each individual to understand when they're engaging your email messages. And in that case, you can use a feature like send time optimization to get that email out the door at the right time for your entire audience.
So you've got a campaign that instead of sending all in one moment, it's actually going to, and I'll misuse the word drip, but it's going to send out the campaign at the right times for the right users.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it does. And it's not simply a feature that is on a sales slick to sound interesting, but it truly is a good amount of insight, looking at historical data, looking at many opens over the course of time, and looking at trends and how it changes.
Yeah, I've seen it personally as a marketer myself. I've seen it go from that conversation Joe was talking about 5 years ago where, hey, Tuesday at 10:38 is the universal time that everyone, is opening their email. I've seen it migrate to and having the ability through the advanced analytics to see what your list's best time is over time, right? It might end up being Tuesday, morning, but it's more centralized to the X number of people that you have in your database because you're able to see that analytics and that trending that Joe was just talking about. I've witnessed it. I've lived it. And I've told, the folks that I report to, it's not about a universal time anymore. It's about what I know from our list and how they respond.
Yeah, and I could imagine that even depending on what's in the campaign, that the response could be different. That maybe there's a time of day when people are, or a moment where, certain parts of a group are more likely to sit and watch a video or read a white paper versus click through and buy something because it's on sale. That depending on exactly what you're going after, that I don't know. I guess as humans, we're tricky.
I would absolutely agree, Robert. And it's one of the reasons why you would want to turn on a feature like send time optimization for some campaigns and not for others.
And so we know when to send it. Now we've got to get people to actually open the message. Subject lines, that's always been fun. Obviously, you want your subject line to match as well as it can to the content within the message. You want to be on point and not frustrate anyone or create any spam issues for yourself. You certainly want to watch out for any negative spam keywords that spam filters might pick up on. But you want to be enticing. I mean, there's that art and science to it, right? Joe, what would your recommendation be to someone that's tasked with writing new email subject lines on an ongoing basis?
So I think it's simple and quick. Test. Most platforms, your platform should allow you to easily test subject lines. And in all actuality, coming up with subject lines is kind of fun for the team, and you don't have to just stay within your bounds of marketing to come up with cool, nifty subject lines. To talk about, living it in the real world, as Steve mentioned, as a marketer, ask folks in IT, ask folks in the call center, ask even, folks in fulfillment, have a little contest. I need 5, 10, 15 subject lines for these upcoming 10 campaigns. Intermingle those things into 3, 4, 5, 6 tests of your subject lines, and you should have a platform that can easily pick a winner and then automatically deploy to the rest of the list. Simple as that. And just doing that as a practice can uplift open rates probably 3 to 5%, which can be very meaningful if you're talking to 2, 4, 6, 8, 100,000 of people, millions even. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add too, search yourself. I don't typically get a chance to check email every waking minute, so I'll let a few hours go by and I'll go into my inbox and I get the same general messages a lot right in my personal email. As I look at 6, 7, 8, 9 messages, I see the same old subject lines and aren't catching my eye. But then there's that one that did catch my eye, and I've really trained myself over the last several years to not only catching myself, catching that subject line, but understanding why. Stopping and actually analyzing that message. Even if I plan to do nothing with that message, just why did it catch my eye? Can I apply that to my next campaign? That I do that test as Joe was talking about. And I couldn't agree any more with that assessment. I don't think there is a perfect, subject line. It works all the time. It's ever evolving, and people are getting more and more, knowledgeable about email. So that is a living thing, and you have to continually test that. And what you used last year, you will not use this year.
I have a feeling that, after this airs, that someone's going to reach out to us and ask us about subject lines, and we're all going to geek out over it.
Yeah. We're a lot about it. Yeah.
I don't want to admit to this, but I happen to get emails from a large chain that sells cheeseburgers. I was receiving subject lines that were upside down using basically ask for it. And I saw that. It was literally upside down words. I was impressed. It was pretty cool.
Mm.
That's pretty awesome. Sometimes that's all it's about, is making you smile a little bit. Goes a long way. And so, I've mentioned the word spam enough times already that we should actually talk about, that whole issue, deliverability. There's more junk mail going out than ever. There's certainly people have no idea how much is being blocked from their inboxes. Forget what's getting to their junk or spam folder, but just the 99 or whatever % of emails that are floating out there that never even make it to them. What are some of the things that folks can do these days, above and beyond what we've already touched on, or maybe diving a little bit deeper, to make sure that their emails do get delivered?
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, well, I was going to say this is something I'm pretty passionate about, and I don't want to refute what we've already, spoken about with regards to spam filtering. However, it's pretty different when you're talking B2C and who you're targeting versus, let's say, B2B. For a business to consumer mailer, chances are you're targeting 70% Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo. That's not uncommon, and Gmail is huge. Gmail is primarily focused on modern filtering techniques revolved around reputation. And reputation in the deliverability world is pretty much identical to what you see in the credit score world. Yeah. Your behaviors as a consumer basically drive your credit score. So if you have a high credit score, you're a good actor, and people are happy to give you credit. If your reputation in the email world is high, you're a good actor, and people give you inbox access. If you're a bad actor, your reputation suffers, and that's where you're getting filtered, you're getting in junk, etc. And the truth is, with this model, there's no way to fool it. There's no way to game the system. You need to send quality email to quality contacts, or you're never going to get in the inbox. It's pretty simple. I can elaborate much further on that. How much time do we have here, Robert? But this all does have to do with things like Webbula, making sure that you have a clean, quality list. Making sure that you have relevant and targeted content. One thing to take away here, tactically speaking, is the concept of ratios. If you're sending 1 million emails and literally 10 people out of 1 million are opening those messages, Google knows that, and there's no way, no how that the next message you send is going to end up in the inbox. If you send 1 million emails and 500,000 people open, however, totally different story. That's positive reputation. That's good behavior. People receiving email and opening it. Bad behavior, you send 1 million emails and 25% of them bounce. No way, no how is that email getting in the inbox. Google knows it. They see that bad behavior. You're done.
The same way that they look at SEO, that you start to get some good rankings for something, but the bounce rate's extremely high. That all the metrics that Google can see suggest that people don't really want to be on that page. That ranking's not going to last very long. So I'm with you there that the systems are too smart for it. And I know, Steve, you had some thoughts I could tell on.
Yeah, I was going to echo what Joe said with respect to sender reputation. I think it's always something that's in the back of your mind as a marketer. But a question we always ask, what are you doing to ensure it, right? We provide kind of that insurance aspect to it, right? You can answer that question that I'm regularly cleaning my list and having it run against reputation threats, so that it gives me the best possible chance of keeping that reputation as high as possible. And I have inherited marketing departments where the previous marketer was blacklisted, and that's not fun. It's a long, arduous, IRS, type experience where you're having to prove that you are not a spammer, and it's not innocent until proven guilty. I think in many cases you are. They consider you guilty until you proved yourself innocent in that regard. So I've taken over for departments that have had to go through that process, and I think sender reputation is also the number one mystery that folks come to us with a problem and say, hey, we've been sending email for a long time, but just for the last X amount of months or years, we've seen a deliverability issue. And we just can't put our finger on it. And again, we're not in the business of prescribing as much as identification, but we will run a test amount of data through our system and show them that they're missing out on they're hitting honeypots at a higher than normal rate. They're hitting bots and phishing attacks, and that's a really good first step into getting that turning that reputation around.
Well, and there's a reputation as well for the domain itself, and typically for the IP addresses where these emails are sending from. At JetRails, where we're primarily hosting e-commerce sites themselves, we're real advocates of keeping your corporate email separate from your transactional email, separate typically from your marketing blasts and your email marketing campaigns, where different IPs sending different things, and so that those transactional emails shouldn't really be impacted by other things that you're engaging with, et cetera, that divide and conquer. There's a lot that goes into it. That's a whole other subject, I suppose. But I also know that I've run into email marketing platforms themselves where they're sharing IPs a lot, and so if there is a bad actor in the network, that there's a sender that's got a bad list or that's sending out some junk mail, that'll start to really impact others. And so I've found that sometimes just switching your email marketing platform can start to improve your overall deliverability and opens and such.
Yep,
you make a good point, Robert. The repair of deliverability, and Steve, you talked about this too, is often one of the most difficult things to achieve. But one of the interesting things, and I could talk at length for this and would be happy to follow up with anybody who's listening that wants to talk about repair. But to your point, when you switch an ESP, often you're spending a lot of time warming up your reputation, warming IPs, warming your domain, getting the recipient ISPs, for instance, to see who you are, understand that you're a good actor, and that you should have inbox placement. When you think about repair of deliverability, that's another good way to envision fixing your reputation. Go back to that concept of warming. What did we do? Well, we only targeted our most engaged recipients for the first, 15 days. Well, maybe it's time to go back to that. Or what can we do to increase engagement? So Gmail, for instance, sees a higher level of open reads, clicks, and replies. All very valuable stuff. We've done that in the past to help folks. Is let's do these 3 strategic campaigns over the next month to this specific segment of the audience to actually increase our reputation. And that can help you get, out of the penalty box, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And so now we've sort of gotten our ducks in a row, I guess, at this point, to the point of figuring out, what's actually going into these messages. For e-commerce, obviously, there's going to be things like sales and closeouts and new products. There are going to be some really direct sales-related emails going out there. Discounts and Black Friday and holidays and what have you. And so that's new services and I don't know, refurbs, whatever you can push out there. What else do you see work for e-commerce merchants specifically to vary up that messaging? Because I always feel like if I get nothing but, and again, I try not to overuse myself as a barometer because there's other types of shoppers and folks out there. But if I get nothing but sales pitches all day from a retailer or or some kind of B2B seller, some sort of wholesale or manufacturer, that I can get a little burnt out of those lists. So not just the frequency that where I don't necessarily want an email a day or 2 or 3 emails a week from someone trying to sell me something, but I don't necessarily want it to be just that doesn't necessarily make me feel warm and fuzzy about their brand. What are some of the other types of campaigns mixed in that you see help keep things healthy, help keep the mix going?
I mean, I've historically categorized 3 different types of campaigns generally: promotional, product, and informational. That's an easy mix of collateral that can be deployed. You already hit promotional. We know what they are. Product-centric campaigns are a mix of informational campaigns, but when you think about how users have engaged your brand, making sure that we have the right product mix in front of folks without necessarily incentives can be engaging, whether that's subject line, whether that's pre-header, whether that's above the fold, below the fold, making sure that you're resonating from a product perspective as a e-com retailer is important. And then informational, there's product-specific information, but there's also things like UGC, review data, review content, reviews themselves. It can be tech sheets, info sheets, or it can be lifestyle content surrounding your products and your audience. Those are all types of campaigns that I think can help fill in the marketing calendar. But beyond topics or beyond the types of collateral, you need to think about automation and you need to think about the customer journey. And instead of that standard batch and blast campaign that's going out to everybody, how do we use the timeliness of user behavior to be relevant as well? Beyond a promotion, how about price drop alert, back in stock alert, abandoned cart alert, site browse, even things like birthday, anniversary? These are all very personally relevant to a recipient and give you the opportunity to put some really good content in an email based on how someone has engaged your brand.
I'll add that Matthew Sweezy from Salesforce was just talking about this yesterday on his Twitter feed. I would add that a purposeful marketing campaign, something talking around your passion, right? If you're if you're an outdoor brand, really driving, just sending messages out and getting, hopefully aligning your customers up with a passion for the outdoors or causes that help support that passion. Really, they mix things up. They're not pitchy, like you were saying, Robert. They're not selling you anything, but hopefully that customer walks away from that message going, yeah, right on. I'm with that. I'm with that message that I just read. And, the next time, months from now, when it comes time to make a decision on making a purchase, I can make that purchase decision with that added layer of purpose behind it. I'm supporting your brand because I align in some strategic values or goals, that you have as an organization. I think that's it's a really hot topic right now. And he was just talking about that yesterday. So it's time that we're discussing that now on this podcast.
Well, and there are generations now that do, in a lot of ways, they like to vote with their dollars, that they like to support organizations that they feel are watching out for the greater good. So, when you've got your social awareness, what you're out there doing in the community, when you're focusing on more than just the particular product, but how you're improving as an organization and what you're doing to do your part, can be engaging and people are interested in it. It's like people want to know how the stuff is made. They, unboxing videos had become big. I don't know if that's still as big a thing as it was, but, people like engaging in more than one way. Even, understanding how to compare products above and beyond reviews, understanding how to shop for a particular product, or, how often they should really be replacing a certain renewable. That there's a lot that you can be sharing with folks that endear them to your brand, that make you experts in your field and not just salespeople. And I've always found that to be healthy. I mean, look, even when it comes to things like couponing, I've told folks, you can just offer the 20% off, but think about giving people 3 coupons to choose from that are going to give them 10% off, and give another 10% to a charity. And so they can vote with their coupon for which charity is going to get the other 10%. And, something engaging, but, and it's not hard. I don't know how creative it really is, but, I don't know. But it's something you don't see often. Right. And so I just like anything that differentiates, really. And Joe, much to your point about putting a subject line upside down, just something that grabs your attention a little bit more, and, that feels like it wasn't, phoned in, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Is that what everyone's going to take away from this podcast?
Yeah, we're going to see where all of our inboxes are going to fill with that now. And so, I'm certainly a fan of, I know, Joe, you were diving into segmentation and personalization, being able to send messages that are going to really resonate more with the user based on data that we have, that we know, based upon their e-commerce shopping history and habits. And Steve, you were talking a little bit about perhaps the ability to append some of that information, which I don't run into as often. I take it that your team has data sources for some of that information about what might resonate with folks.
Yeah, we definitely, the organization's been in business for 10 years now. And as a function of our other services, we're also been able to, to collect self-reported, deterministic, individually linked, things about, over 80% of the U.S. consumer market. So, we're able to add in really unique insight, I think, to people's existing information. So it usually the request usually comes to us, and typically one or two scenarios. I'm missing, really important pieces of my data help, or I'd like to learn a little bit more about my customer. I think I have a really good set of PII, but I want to learn more about their interests. So we're able to, through a combination of our data, help append missing pieces to that existing data. We also get our fair amount of people asking us to sell us that stuff, and we will not do that. We make it very clear that we're not data sellers. You will have to provide your own list to us for us to append that extra information to it. But I think that just helps. Just hyper personalize, hyper segment, and give you more confidence in marketing because you know more about that audience. I think nothing tells a marketer more to be able to run in and tell the CEO that they know that a significant portion of their audience has this particular interest or that particular buying interest. Let's do a marketing campaign, and let's, like Joe said earlier, let's test to see if that is valid or not.
Yeah, and so I guess the last mile for me, we've tackled, the entire process of getting to the point of getting this email, getting the user's information, getting a message put together that's going to resonate with them, and getting it into their inbox, getting them to open it. Now, at that point, it's about where we're driving them. So I know that from the hosting standpoint, that's where we partner up with fine folks like your teams. And Joe, I know we put out a great article with Emarsys, a number of weeks ago, that talked about how web hosting impacts the email marketing experience and certainly the numbers. Do you find that things like the loading speed on the website? I mean, people come to you folks when it comes to getting out the campaigns, but you can bring the horse to water. You can't necessarily make him drink if the water doesn't show up for too long.
It's funny because it's so foundational to what we do in the digital space that it almost can be overlooked. And I think about email and how old email is. I think the first marketing email went out in like 1998. After Amazon sent their first marketing email, it started to become a thing. And that's old, really old when you think about the life of the internet. So when you think about hosting and the performance of websites, it is truly where, the buck stops there. And to your point, I could send you, 10,000 clicks from an email. And if page load times are happening measured in 3, 4, 5 seconds, I'm sorry, you've just completely dropped the ball and there's zero ROI on that campaign. Yeah.
And it's funny that we still run into folks where, their scalability is the issue. So they send out these great campaigns, but they get too good a response. They get too many people coming to the site. Site can't handle it. And they come over to us to try to resolve issues like that. But it's kind of interesting that, look, if your site's not secure, if it's not performing, that your all that good branding that you're putting out there and all that relationship that you're building with the shopper can go down the tubes so quickly. And I'd say that goes for the entire conversion rate optimization funnel when it comes to the website. So, your site's got to perform from start to finish. The marketing is just getting them in the door, but your salesperson, in essence, your website has to be able to close the deal. Mm-hmm. So sometimes gets overlooked in conversion rates and things when it comes to, is this campaign performing? Well, it could be the best campaign ever, but the other side of the house has got to match. I know at JetRes we've got some great agency partners that I know work with teams like yours to make sure that that they're meeting you where the websites need to be. So sort of an interesting arena. Well, I suppose we've had a pretty good run here today from top to bottom. Gentlemen, any final thoughts to add?
I think when it comes to email marketing specifically, I think my opinion and views are pretty well known. Identify, build your audience. Don't play in that anonymous space. Let's use addressable marketing so we can speak directly to an individual. The simple stat is we are going to sell more. We're going to convert at higher rates if we can engage and interact with a potential customer. And doing that requires some intelligence, hopefully automation, and ultimately at the end of the day, you're crafting a customer journey that's really prompting and motivating these prospects or these leads or these contacts to become customers. And then you're nurturing and warming that relationship over time to really drive repeat purchase.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Joe just said and say that, I've been in the game for a while. I've heard that email is going away every single year that I've been in the game, and I don't think it's been more relevant than today. No matter the introduction of social media and, SMS, email is still, still the most effective way, in my opinion, to introduce your product, to get people engaged, to continue loyalty, because people are still using it.
Awesome. Well, for our listeners, we really appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the podcast. If you have questions or thoughts, definitely we love, when you communicate with us and when you share your thoughts on LinkedIn, Twitter, on Facebook, wherever you want to connect with us. Certainly you can reach out directly through jetrails.com, and happy selling.